Greetings, fellow songwriters and seekers, and welcome back to Muse and Measure. If you haven't done so yet, please hit that subscribe button down below. All right, so I want to meditate and spend a good amount of time on this issue of melody. It's something that's often overlooked, maybe because it's kind of amorphous. It's really hard to pin down what makes a great melody. There's a bunch of different theories, but they're pretty esoteric and they really require a lot of music theory. And so I want to break all that down and try to make making melodies as simple as possible. Of course, it can't be simple, or it either is simple or it isn't. If it comes naturally and it just flows, then it's simple to write a melody, and it almost feels like you don't even write it yourself. It just is a gift. The old sense of having some kind of muse whispered in your ear. I know when you think of St. Gregor and the Gregorian chants, there's a depiction of him with a little angel whispering all these chants in his ears, so they came from some higher purpose. And in all the ancient texts, they always say, that some kind of muse or angel came down and delivered this text. Well, you may still believe that, and if you do, more power to you, but for us materialists, we are up to our own skills, or we're left to our own skills, and we have to learn how to do this ourselves. So even though it might not bear a bunch of fruit, I think it's definitely worthwhile to spend time doing some exercises on writing melodies. Now, most people, I don't know, why do I even say most people? Maybe it's not most people, but what I've encountered from people is that, like, if someone's going to write a song, they'll start with a chord progression, so they come up with a chord progression that they like, a groove that they like, and then all of a sudden, okay, well, I got to sing something over this, so they'll just kind of find a melody over that. Da, 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 so that's certainly valid. If you can come up with great melodies that way, that's awesome. Another way is that people come up with lyrics, and then they have to do, they might start singing the lyrics. So let's say my lyric, let me just grab a random book from the shelf and grab a lyric. Let's do some Francois Villon, why don't we? Okay, let's grab a couple lines here. And I love and turn, I do disown, to war and flame I challenge it. Death in love's person hurls me down, and neither of them cares a whit. So say I wrote that. I didn't write it, of course. Francois Villon wrote it, and it was then translated by Norman Cameron. Great book, Poems of Francois Villon. So what people do then is they take these words and then they try to maybe improvise some kind of melody to it. Especially, I've worked with a lot of singers who couldn't, they barely could play guitar or piano, and then they would come to me and ask for help, and I would co-write these songs by providing the harmony. They would come with the lyrics, and they had some kind of sense of what the melody should sound like. And using my ear, I could kind of figure out what the melody was and then find the chords that would fit with it. And love in turn I do disown, to war and flame I challenge it. Death in love's person hurls me down, and neither of them cares a whit. Right? So that's valid too. But since melody is such an important part of music, it's worth spending the time to actually learn what makes a melody good, and to develop our own taste in things, and to try things out and develop the skills around writing melodies. Now, you may eventually go back to the way you've always been writing melodies, which is, finding a groove and a chord progression and then kind of improvising over it and finding a melody, and that's great. Or you might continue to be a person who starts with a lyric. Maybe if you are filled with lyrics and that's your main source of inspiration, that's totally valid. And this is not meant to change your songwriting practice. This is only meant to give you some extra skills and kind of to make them intuitive and part of the way you approach music, so that your song will be even better and your melodies will be even stronger. Because even if you go back to those old ways of doing things, the way you're comfortable with, you're now going to come back stronger and have a greater sense of melody. Okay? So I want to talk a little bit about some general rules of melody, and then I'll in subsequent videos I will tackle some of the other issues and get into the real kind of nitty-gritty music theory around writing melodies. So let me just go over some general guidelines here. Remember, the guidelines and technique are when you get in trouble. I remember going to a talk once by Dave Grusin up at University of Colorado, and he said, technique is what I used when I paint myself into a corner. So when you find yourself, like I've led myself up to this point in the song, and I have no idea what to do next. Or I get myself into kind of a bind where I take myself maybe out of my range, or the chords get really weird. So learning this technique is really going to, even if you don't incorporate it into your practice of songwriting, it will be something that can save you in a time of distress when you have no idea what to do next from inspiration. Because really we want to start with inspiration. If you have a great seed, something that is really powerful and really moves you emotionally, obviously I'm not going to say, well, throw that away and start with the rules of melody. But these techniques and these skills will help you if you get into trouble. Okay. You can think of it this way: if you're inspired, your emotions and your spirit want to express themselves, but they need the body and mind to effectively do it in a way that can communicate something to someone else. So that's the other thing. So it's also a way to check to make sure that your melody is something that is satisfying for other people to hear. Maybe you know what you meant, but if you don't have these skills and techniques, then it's going to maybe hamper your abilities to get that feeling that you have inside and get it into somebody else's body and mind so that they experience what you were experiencing. Okay? All right, so I'll just basically break down, there's three main kind of rules of melodies, and they're pretty basic but important to go over. Okay, so melodies usually have an octave-and-a-half range. So what does that mean? So an octave is when you go up the scale, once you hit your root note again, that's an octave. So if I'm in the key of C, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So once you hit that note again, you can hear it's higher than the starting note. That's an octave, okay? So the rule with melody is that you can actually go an octave and a half. So another half would be up a fifth above the octave. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And then it'll go 5 notes more. Okay, so that's a fifth above the octave. So you have this range of, okay, which is a pretty big range. And the main reason for this rule is that it has to be singable. And most people don't have these giant ranges where they can sing really low notes or sing really high notes. They have a kind of a set area where their voice feels comfortable and where it sounds good. And if you go too low, all of a sudden it gets too breathy and you can almost not hear the words. Or if it gets too high, the person might crack their voice. So that's why we have this rule about an octave and a half. The second rule is there should be some kind of repetition. And I wrote a whole book on this. It's called On Becoming Music. I wrote it with a great scholar and composer, a really brilliant person named Peter Price. I'll put a link to it down below. But it was all about, repetition in music and redundancies in music, and how certain types of music tend to be more repetitive. And I argue in that book that basically, in order to have an ecstatic listening experience, there has to be some repetition so that you create some kind of formal structure so that the brain can catch on to some kind of pattern. but then that it slowly embellishes and becomes more elaborate and basically an exuberance of the form. And that's where we experience ecstasy, where we are delighted, where we can still hold on and figure out what's going on, and it still relates back to the form that we have become accustomed to and familiar with, but it takes us out of that. Just like in our own mental state, we are in this default mode all the time, and we're processing the world in the same way. Now, you don't want something that's a complete shock, that's something completely different, but something that's a little bit above and enhanced and outside of that. And that's when we have these ecstatic, transcendent experiences. If it's too all over the place, it's alienating. It's like, what the hell is that? And we've had this experience with, when you listen to really kind of avant-garde jazz or new classical music, especially atonal music. It's often very hard to not be alienated by it and just feel overwhelmed by it. And those types of music have different purposes. They're not meant to like hold our hands and guide us into the warmth of some kind of heavenly experience. They're meant to kind of jar us and challenge us. But that doesn't mean that type of music cannot have a transcendent experience, and maybe it's just slightly different. I wouldn't call it ecstasy, though. So a melody has to have some level of repetition. Okay. So what does that mean? So if I have an idea, we call ideas in music motifs. My idea is, okay? So that's my first motif. And I can either repeat that right away or I could go to something else. Okay? At some point, I'm going to want to repeat one of those ideas. So. So there was some repetition there. Otherwise, it's just all over the place. Now, that was a little atonal because I went out of the key, but you could hear I didn't really repeat anything there. There was a repetition of rhythm, but the motif did not repeat. So you want your melody to have some type of repetition, and it's going to be up to you how repetitive you want it. The more repetitive it is, the more catchy it's going to be and memorable for people. But if it's too repetitive, like baby shark, do 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 do, baby shark, that just gets annoying. And so the listener, we want to have some kind of repetition so we can pick up on the pattern, but we want variation too. And we want new things to happen and to be surprised. So it's this balancing act between newness and repetition that you have to master in your melodies. Okay? And then the last point, let me see what it is. You want some kind of rising motion. So you don't want your melody to stay all on the low part. That's just kind of a boring melody. What you want something is to go up, and you want to do this towards the kind of latter half. It's like, just think of it like a story. We talked about story arcs. You want the climax, and that's where you have this rising motion, the highest note that you're going to sing. You want it to be towards the end. So if we think it like a story, you have the exposition, then you have the rising action, and then the climax should be that penultimate point. And then the end, you come back to some kind of home. And that's where you should go back to maybe your first motif. So. Okay. Not that that was a great melody or anything, but I think you get the same sense that you see how I went high at the end. And so every melody is going to have this kind of rising motion in it. So it's going to go, it's not going to just stay flat and, just be a plane. You want it to have that upward motion. And that gives us that lift, and emotionally and spiritually, that's what the music takes us there. And as the listener is paying attention, their emotions follow the melodic line, and it affects them, if it's an effective melody. and it will give us that sense of being lifted up. But of course, you know, if we get lifted too high and it just keeps going, then we get alienated again, and there's some kind of sense of fear there, because, you know, imagine, like, you know, putting on a jetpack and you're flying, and then you just get higher and higher and higher. At some point, it's gonna stop being fun, and all of a sudden start to get scary, and like, what the hell am I gonna do? This is looking very hairy all of a sudden. Okay, so those are the 3 basic rules of melody. I'm gonna get into all kinds of other things, like developing motifs, when to use repetition, when to use variation, different types of melodic lines, conjunctive and disjunctive, different intervals you can use. But I want to just get us started and get our feet wet with those 3 rules. Remember, once again, that they are the octave-and-a-half range you can use, nothing more. You want to use some kind of repetition, but of course, on the flip side, you also want to use some variation. And then lastly, it should have some rising motion, especially towards the end of the melodic line. All right, well, best of luck as you write your melodies and start to think about using these principles in your songs. And if you have any questions or comments, please put them down below. All right, take care. I'll see you next time.